Build Back Better is just more Biden BS in bulk. Say that 10 times fast. Wilkow starts now. Welcome to the program. I'm Andrew Wilkow. The Democrats have a bold new plan for America, something we've never seen before. Tax and spend, grow the economy. Welfare equals growth. All right, that might be a bad attempt at sarcasm, but that's exactly how the Democrats, led by Joe Biden, Chuck Schumer, and Nancy Pelosi, that's what they're trying to sell. The Democrats have been pushing this forever. Here's Nancy Pelosi a decade ago.
Now, let me say about unemployment insurance, we talk about it as a safety net and the rest. This is one of the biggest stimuluses to our economy. Economists will tell you this money is spent quickly. It injects demand into the economy and is job creating. It creates jobs faster than almost any other initiative you can name because, again, it is money that is needed for families to survive and it is spent. So it has a double benefit. It helps those who've lost their jobs, but it also is a job creator.
All right, great. So why bother with this whole Build Back Better thing? Just centralize all government powers and spend trillions on welfare and boom, economic growth. Combine that with the American Families Plan, the Green New Deal, continued non-COVID related COVID relief, cash giveaways called child tax credits, free pre-K, free college, and maybe single-payer health care. And don't forget Biden's plans for the suburbs, which is to destroy them. There's a disaster brewing. Right now, people in Cuba are risking life and limb to bring an end to the horrors of a tyrannical, centralized socialist government. Wait, do I see an American flag being waved? Why would Latinos in Cuba wave such a symbol of racism and oppression? At the very same time, very safe and comfortable people here in the U.S. are trying to impose a government just like Cuba's. Here is Senator Marco Rubio, whose family fled after the Cuban Revolution.
World country yesterday watched these images out of Cuba, really unprecedented. In 62 years of communist tyranny on the island of Cuba, we have never seen, there's never been what now is up to 40 cities in which people took to the streets organically, unorganized, grassroots, to ask for the end of that tyranny. And I think it's important for a lot of people that are new to the issue to sort of understand what that means and what it's all about. I think that the first lesson we need to take away from it is that Marxism, socialism, doesn't work.
He's 100% right. And he continues.
They gave up their freedom, or they were told, give up your freedom in exchange for a world-class healthcare system. It's not a world-class healthcare system. In fact, it's a healthcare system that does not even have the ability to deal with COVID at its very basic level. That says, give up your freedom for economic security. What economic security? People are hungry, homes are crumbling. There is no economy. There is no real economy in Cuba.
Sharp turn back. Okay, Joe Biden is not a Castro, but Biden has been waiting since 1973 to sit in the El Presidente chair and direct federal spending. And he has signed on to every single big government left-wing idea ever.
Last week, I was up in Wisconsin to talk about a bipartisan agreement to modernize American infrastructure and in the process create millions of good-paying jobs. That's not my estimate. That's Wall Street estimates. That's everybody's estimate. Millions of good-paying jobs. Not $7, not $8, not $10, not even $15 an hour. Good, prevailing wage jobs. And here's what it means for Illinois. You've got, like many states, all states, you've got 2,374 bridges and over 6,200 miles of highway that are in disrepair. As a result, every driver in this state pays a hidden tax, about $600 per year in wasted time and wasted fuel because of the nature of the roads and bridges. And by the way, you're better than a lot of states. Not to mention the challenge of getting to work or getting to a daycare center on time to avoid that late fee when you pick up your child. Your governor has an ambitious infrastructure plan, and under a bipartisan infrastructure agreement, we're going to make the biggest investment in roads and bridges since the construction of the interstate highway system, literally creating millions of good-paying jobs.
Now the promise that the federal government, keyword, is going to swoop in and fill every pothole and get every parent to daycare before some late fee kicks in. Wait, I thought pre-K was going to be free. Anyway, he said the governor, some of the governor of Illinois has an ambitious infrastructure plan that requires a bipartisan agreement in Washington. Well, why? If Illinois needs to upgrade roads, bridges, and tunnels that are not part of the, keyword, federal interstate highway system, then Illinois should pay for Illinois infrastructure with Illinois tax dollars. Crazy, I know. Next up, the federal government is going to replace every rusty pipe and make sure that silly YouTube videos can be viewed in every hole and corner of the country.
This agreement also allows us to replace every lead pipe and service line in America, benefiting 10 million homes. It's going to address lead exposure in 400,000 of our schools and daycare facilities where children drink that water. This would be the largest investment in clean drinking water in American history when we pass it. And one in every 10 people in Illinois lacks access to high-speed internet. The bipartisan agreement that Dick and others have made sure we're getting, the agreement allows us to connect every American to reliable, high-speed, affordable internet. Every single American, rural and urban.
Okay, nobody is against clean water, but states, counties, and cities all have utility authorities. Same goes for high-speed internet. But again, Biden and Democrats promising all the fixes to every problem must and will come from Washington. Next, free education. It's free.
The Build Back Better plan agenda starts with education. You know, one of the reasons why we were the leading country in the world for so long and still on the edges is because we're the first industrial nation in the world to allow 12 years of free education back at the turn of the 20th century. But everybody's caught up. At the time they were debating what should be education in America, the argument was there should be 12 years of free education. And that's what got us ahead. That's what had us leap ahead of the rest of the world. But as I said, today everybody's caught up. Does anybody think in the 21st century, with the change that's taking place in technology and across the board, that 12 years of education is enough to be able to live a middle-class life? I don't think so. And so the fact of the matter is, I've decided we should have a minimum of 14 years of education.
I don't know how all this high-quality education from the government can be free if we're paying taxes. Well, then again, millions of us aren't. But finally, the grand finale, the cherry on top. Biden and the Democrats are going to make it rain. Free money, baby, every month. Who loves you?
As I've said again and again, people who really need a tax break in this country are America's working families. It's time they get a tax break. So my Build Back Better agenda would extend expanded child care tax credit we passed under my American Rescue Plan. Those of you who have children under the age of 7, you're going to get and depending on your income and your income taxes, you're going to get a cash payment back. Up to now, guess what? You get $2,000 to declare a dependent. If you have 2 children, you get $4,000 off a $10,000 tax bill. It's important. But if you don't make enough money to be able to owe that kind of tax, you don't get a tax credit, you don't get anything. Well, under this proposal, guess what? You're in a situation where if you have a child under the age of 7, you get back $3,600 in cash. In addition to that, those of you who are in that situation are going to start to see that coming in by the end of this month on a monthly basis.
Free. Everything's going to be free from the Hill. The nation's unemployment rate increased in June's employment report, edging up from 5.8% to 5.9%. This is well above February 2020's 3.5% pre-pandemic rate, applying 2020's higher labor force participation rate to today's employment level, and the current rate would be an astronomical 8.5%. High as today's official rate is, many states' rate far surpasses it. Viewing unemployment from such a state perspective also makes it a very partisan one. The states with the highest unemployment rates are politically Democratic. So the states with the highest unemployment rate are run by the Democrats. Good to know. We have two big glaring problems here, and both are math. First, in no order, the equation of what might be called public finance. For as long as we could remember, the Democrats have told us that we could reduce the number of people actually paying for government spending and increase the number of people who see a direct benefit. In short, we can't. This model of a numeric minority making actual versus perceived contributions to the tax base simply doesn't work. Why? Well, when the majority no longer bears any cost of government, that majority will always vote for the candidate who will promise ever more. And tax the rich doesn't work at that point because the government has promised more largesse than the rich pay for, no matter the tax rate. For years, I've called these people zero liability voters, excluding veterans and some retirees. There is no cost to their vote, at least as they perceive it. But of course, there is a cost. It's just that somebody else pays it. And therein lies the failure of the Democrats' theory. The second problem is the fallacy that, to badly twist the quote, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. It's not in the case of the states versus the federal government. There are no extra resources that derive from combining revenue from the states. You see, every single dollar of keyword federal taxation originates at a town, a county, and of course, a state. But then it goes to the federal government and gets mixed into a giant pot, so to speak. Then federal representatives and senators agree to trade favors in the form of largesse for their states and their districts. Conversely, local and state politicians have to essentially beg the federal government to bring those tax dollars back. Who actually thinks this model is efficient? The tax dollars would be available, resources would be available for those local and state interests had not the federal government taxed them away. There is no possible way for a dollar to leave a local community for Washington, D.C. and come back as a dollar. And what I mean is that there's a cost to this roundabout. If there's a pothole on Elm Street in any town USA, the town council and the mayor should fill it. How long will it take for the mayor to fill the pothole versus waiting for the federal grant and a contract based on Davis-Bacon Act labor laws to do that work? You know the answer. And right now, senators can't wait to line up the taxpayer deficit spending projects. The Senate has officially kicked off its process for inserting congressionally directed spending into appropriations bills for the fiscal year starting October 1st, with almost all Democrats but only 15 Republicans in that chamber participating thus far. Senate Appropriations Chairman Patrick Leahy, Democrat Vermont, originally said that in March that Republicans would receive half of the earmarked funds in the fiscal 2022 spending bills. He later altered that in May when spokesperson Jay Tilton said it was Leahy's intention to split the project 50-50 unless Senate Republicans did not participate in requesting earmarks in a significant way. Democrats declined to define exactly what would qualify as significant. I can already show you what goodies Senator Tammy Baldwin wants for Wisconsin because she wrote an op-ed for the State Journal entitled, "Wisconsin Needs Blue-Collar Blueprint for Infrastructure." Quote, "Far too many families, small businesses, and farmers across rural Wisconsin do not have affordable access to reliable, high-speed broadband service. And according to the White House, more than 13.9% of Wisconsin residents live in areas where, by one definition, no broadband infrastructure provides minimally acceptable speeds. Moreover, 69% of Wisconsin residents live in areas with only one such provider. In fact, a report from the Wisconsin Policy Forum last year showed that more than 82,000 children in Wisconsin did not have reliable internet access at home. This all needs to change. Well, maybe, crazy idea, she should run for governor and make that happen at the state level. Again, crazy, I know. The Constitution separates the role and responsibilities of the state government and federal government. But don't tell that to Joe Biden. The difference is the states cannot run up debt, but the federal government can. And we are going to be at 40 trillion sooner than you think. If Biden were, let's say, to magically create all these good paying jobs, middle class union jobs, okay, whoa, hold on. Before I go to the argument, let me quote, as I do often, Henry Hazlitt's 1946 book, Economics in One Lesson. Quote, "There's no more persistent and influential faith in the world today than the faith in government spending. Everywhere government spending is presented as a panacea for all of our economic ills. Is private industry partially stagnant? We can fix it all by government spending. Is there unemployment? That is obviously due to insufficient private purchasing power. The remedy is just as obvious. All that is necessary for the government to spend enough to make up the deficiency." Quick jump to save time. A bridge built primarily to provide employment is a different kind of bridge. When providing employment becomes the end, need becomes a subordinate consideration. Projects have to be invented. Instead of thinking only where bridges must be built, the government spenders begin to ask themselves where bridges can be built. So, here's the argument. 1/50th of just about everything in Washington should be in a state capital, not D.C. The federal government cannot replace the states as managers and financiers of state and local affairs. The faraway federal government was not designed to override state and local government. When the federal government holds tax dollars over the heads of state and local governments, the state and local governments have to be told what they want and what they need. There's no line of text in the Constitution that allows voters, even a majority, to vote themselves gifts from others in the form of taxes paid and wealth redistributed. The United States is not a democracy. 50% plus one does not get whatever it wants. The Democrats think they could win in 2022 and 2024 by offering free stuff to millions of people. Trillion-dollar deficits are going to turn to $3 trillion deficits. Since Joe Biden likes to whisper, let me say this. You are going to pay for this one way or another. The people who are getting the free stuff today will have to pay for it tomorrow. The free money can't flow forever. The federal government cannot fill every pothole. There is no growth in welfare. The central authority cannot hire every person to make up for unemployment. Central planning is going to fail again. The Cuban people are rising up against all of this. Will we take to the streets and chant, USA Libre? All right, joining us on the program right now, she is taking the Gen Z and millennial space by storm with her show, Poplitics. She's also a contributor to Turning Point USA. Alex Clark, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
All right, I got a question. I might be an old man in this. What is a cute conservative? Because I think I'm married to one.
Oh my gosh, well, you're a very lucky man if you are, because basically it's exactly how it sounds. It's a conservative woman who's cute. We love fashion. We're not pop culture deficient, but also we are conservative.
Okay, so I definitely am married to one. But wait, what is this pop culture stuff? I thought conservatives hate pop culture.
Well, that's what you would think, but actually I host the show called Poplitics. It's on Instagram TV at Poplitics, and conservatives, by the way, are what I call fans of my show, and it's this massive movement of young women especially who are busting the stereotype that conservatives do not like pop culture do not understand it, that we're uncool, that we're unfashionable, that we have no idea what's going on as far as culture goes. And so Politics is an entertainment news show, and I cover all of that celeb gossip and stuff that you like from E! News or TMZ, except it's pop culture without the propaganda.
See, here's what I don't get. You know, it seems like some of these industries are willing to lose 50% of the population, right? Like Vogue wouldn't put Melania Trump on the cover, who's an actual model, but they will portray Jill Biden as a goddess. I think it's okay to put Melania Trump on a fashion magazine. I think it's okay to dress her as well. You know, Michael Jordan said the most profound thing about all of this: Republicans buy basketball sneakers too. You would think that these businesses would just stick to their business and want customers.
Oh, well, of course. And that's really, that's the dream, right? But at this point, the country is so polarized, we're probably never going to get back to that time that we were living in, where it was kind of a live and let live. Oh, you're a conservative, you're a liberal, who cares? I'm not sure that we're ever going to get back to that. So going forward, we just have to really make sure as conservatives that we are making our own pop culture and getting in those cultural spaces as well, just so people have an option, so that when they're scrolling through their social media feeds, they're looking for news, whether that's on sports or pop culture or whatever it is, that they do have an alternative to just a left-wing news source.
You know, it's funny, I was joking about my wife, but she's one of those people. She wants to buy her cosmetics or her fashion or her shoes without having woke crammed down her throat.
That's all we want. And so I'm trying to do that. We try to shout out on Politics different brands and businesses that are friendly to conservatives, so that you know where to shop, you know what to buy. I really try my best to cover everything culture-wise. So make sure you check out my show on Instagram @Politics. And this is a really good bridge, a good way to get your grandchildren, your kids, other young people in your life that you know involved in politics that are maybe a little bit apprehensive to watching, serious hard news or listening to a serious hard news podcast on politics. My show is fun. We're talking about the Kardashians. We're covering The Bachelor. We're doing all that stuff. But in there, I'm also teaching you about what conservatives actually believe, and that we're not as scary as you think.
That's awesome. I thank you so much for joining us. We'll have to get you back on for a longer interview. It was a lot of fun.
I'd love to do that. Yes, I'm so sorry I didn't have extra time today, but it was so great to talk to you.
We'll talk to you soon. On a side note, who knew Amazon workers wanted to ban books? Headline from NBC News: Amazon workers petition and to quit over anti-LGBTQ book sales. Okay, I don't get this. The question here is over a book that questions the science of transgender. So Amazon workers are going to walk off the job because people might want to read and think. Amazon made its stake in the market by selling books. Selling books is good. Reading books is good. I thought it was always, you Republicans don't like that fancy book learning stuff. So now we've got people who are literally going to quit their jobs because they don't want Amazon to sell a book that questions the science of transgender. I know how this is going to work. There's so much free money out there in Biden's plans, these people don't have to hold down a job. All right, I have a lot of history with our next guest. We worked together at WABC Radio in New York City, and his son Anthony was the ring bearer in my wedding. He's the founder of the Guardian Angels and the Republican nominee to be mayor of New York City, Curtis Lewa. How you doing, sir?
Great, Andrew, and you're right. My oldest son, Anthony, was your ring bearer. I must say, as I sat there in your marriage ceremony, which was absolutely gorgeous, I mean, it had all the trappings of a great wedding. I, Andrew, was having nightmares from my many weddings. So you've had good luck, good knockers.
Yeah, I got lucky. And look, you and I go way back, way back. But nothing seems to have changed in New York City, except for the worse. Bill de Blasio has proven to be the most incompetent man probably to ever be mayor of New York City. I'll say this, I'm no fan of Mike Bloomberg, but he was at least a competent man. Mayor Giuliani obviously was the mayor that revolutionized the way crime was dealt with in the city of New York, but now it's on, it's just, ever since Bill de Blasio, it's been terrible. And this is the story of major metropolitan cities all across the country, between Antifa, BLM, now pulling back the police and street crime. Republicans have a very hard time getting elected in New York City, but I think this is about the time when people have had enough.
No doubt, Andrew. And my advantage is I've been in the urban areas for 42 years as leader of the Guardian Angels in New York City. And in 13 countries, 130 cities around the country, most of them in major American metropolitan areas that have had a horrific increase in gun violence and gang violence. So I can go into the neighborhoods in which the only Republican they've ever seen, Andrew, is Abraham Lincoln on a $5 bill and be accepted. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to vote for me as a Republican. So I've secured an independent party line in the general election. You may have remembered that Michael Bloomberg, with his millions of dollars, bought an independence party line. People don't realize if it were only Republican votes against his Democratic adversary, Michael Bloomberg, with billions of dollars, would have lost. He depended on that independence party line because people who were moderate Democrats or independents would never cross the Maginot line. My own parents, when they were alive, Andrew, hardcore Democrats. They weren't Reagan Democrats. They weren't Giuliani Democrats. In fact, when you walked into my mother's and father's room, there was a picture of Jesus Christ, John Paul, the Pope, JFK, and Barack Obama. And my father would sit me at the table and he would tell me, as a merchant seaman, a hardcore union member, Curtis, Republicans are greedy. They only care for the rich. It's the Democrats who are there for the working people. Had they been alive now, if I were only on the Republican line, my own parents would not have voted for me, but they would have voted for me on this independent line in which I qualified by getting the appropriate number of signatures. So I'm ready for the general election.
Almost all the major metropolitan cities have been run by the progressive left for the past 70 or plus years. You just described your parents. I bet they were law and order Democrats, right? There was a time when Democrats, union members, believed in their police departments. They had a love it or leave it attitude. They didn't like crime. They didn't like homelessness. They didn't like drug use on the streets. They didn't like rioting and looting. Democrats would never tolerate that, 70 years ago. But ever since the 1960s, it's been creeping up and up and up and up and up. Maybe people who never thought about voting for Republicans should get that chance. I mean, how much worse with crime and urban violence can it get?
All right, now, Andrew, let me tell you what just happened. It sort of encapsulate everything you talked about. President Joe Biden summoned Democratic leaders from urban areas and their police commissioners from all over the country to have a summit discussion in Washington, D.C. And what he was offering them was money to immediately hire more police because cities are in triage. They need police desperately. In New York City, the very mayor who single-handedly has destroyed the city that we love, de Blasio, rejected the president of the United States twice, said we want the money to hire police. Andrew Cuomo, the governor, said we will not take money to hire police all throughout New York State's urban areas where they're desperately needed, including Albany, where I was with you, in Arbor Hill and South End. And Eric Adams, who has been anointed the next mayor of the city of New York. There's a coronation going on. He himself was able to sit at the table with Joe Biden, our president. And you say to yourself, why? He's just a Brooklyn borough president. All they do is cut ribbons. He's not the mayor, the governor, or a police commissioner. That obviously was a political act. He himself turned the president down. And other cities, likewise, Minneapolis, where there's been a 200% increase in murders. Do you know that an average citizen had to go to federal court, petition a federal judge to force the city of Minneapolis to accept the money to hire cops? That's what I intend on doing in New York City. Go to federal court. As citizen Curtis Sliwa, who happens to be running on the Republican independent line for the mayoralty of the city of New York, and ask a federal judge to issue an order that demands that New York City, which is in a crime crisis, take the money from President Joe Biden and immediately hire police. Have you ever heard of a situation where cities who are offered money from the federal government didn't take it? Normally, they're on their hands and knees begging for money from Washington and always saying, hey, we send $2 to Washington. We only get $1 back. You know, we deserve more. In this case, they're saying no to more cops. Without more cops, there will continue to be anarchy, looting, shooting, rising violent crime and gang activity at unprecedented levels. It's like triage. You need surgeons to go in there now. You don't need holistic, homeopathic programs, after-school education, summer job programs. You think hardcore gangbangers, Bloods, and Crips are going to give up slinging drugs and carrying guns to have a summer works program job, a no-show job? Absolutely not. We have to get realistic about this, Andrew, and that's what I'm bringing to the campaign.
You know, I have faith in New York City, and I know it's going to sound crazy. A city like Chicago, no matter how bad it gets, they just keep recycling and retreading the Democrats. In New York City, people got so fed up with crime, they elected Rudy Giuliani, right? I mean, you had Ed Koch, you had Mayor David Dinkins, you had the famous Bernie Goetz story. The people boiled over with anger at crime. Times Square was a war zone. Tompkins Square Park was a war zone. Harlem and the Bronx were war zones, and people had enough. I look at some of these other cities that won't even consider. I mean, it would be like impossible to get a Republican mayor, or at least a law and order mayor in Portland or Seattle at this point. Minneapolis, I don't know if that city's ever coming back. I do have some faith in New York City. It's been a long time since there's been a real Republican mayor, but my God, that city, I returned, I was in Times Square the other day, and it was like, what the hell is going on in this city? It's scary.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Tompkins Square Park, which is in the Lower East Side, the East Village. But in reality, I actually lived opposite Tompkins Square Park when the anarchists and the criminals took over that park. And I remember the outcome. It just completely destroyed the quality of life of that whole area under David Dinkins, who you had mentioned. That was also the year that I was shot 5 times on the orders of John Gotti Sr. to John Gotti Jr. and the Gambino crime family, right on that corner of Tompkins Square Park. And it was unsolved for years. It took the election of Republican Mayor Rudy Giuliani to all of a sudden attack criminality, crack down on quality of life violations. He had zero tolerance. He had the broken windows theory. So he attacked the problem from the bottom up, knowing and realizing that to solve the most egregious crimes, you had to resolve the petty crimes. And eventually, my case went to federal court because of the really good detailed work done by police officers during the Giuliani years to find the individuals who shot me on the orders of John Gotti Sr. But had it remained a Dinkins administration, which it could have, that would have gone unresolved with thousands of other cases. We had 2,000 murders a year. And notice how now, Andrew, they're vilifying Rudy Giuliani, who endorsed me in the Republican primary. They're throwing him under the bus. They're calling him a racist because he imposed quality of life initiatives that benefited actually neighborhoods where people of color lived, even more so than Manhattan or Park Avenue or Wall Street or any of those things that we most associate with New York City, like Times Square or Herald Square. And to see him being vilified like this, the short memory span of people to know how desperate we were. It was Dante's Inferno. And he turned 42nd Street into Disney World.
I remember that. And you know what? I could say this about just about every major metropolitan city. If crime goes up and businesses leave and foot traffic goes down, you lose your local economy. I mean, yeah, there's always something for the super rich people, right? I mean, the people that live on Central Park West or Park Avenue, they read about this stuff in the New York Times. But when Giuliani came in and cracked down on crime, and he actually got rid of the commuter tax, and people thought, that's it, the city's budget's done, he attracted so many businesses and tourism to the city that the city started to thrive again. Jobs were created. The city became more affordable under Giuliani. Why? Because there were more jobs for people who were previously on welfare. I think a city like New York needs real conservative Republican leadership. And look, I'm glad you're running. I'm glad you're talking to the people in these neighborhoods. Like you said, many of them probably back in the day didn't vote for Giuliani. They might not have voted for Bloomberg. Their biggest experience, like you said, was seeing a Lincoln on a $5 bill. But how much worse can it get when you have a guy like Bill de Blasio? And he is indicative of many of these big city mayors. You got his wife who walked away with hundreds of millions of dollars for the Thrive New York program. We've seen this kind of corruption in Chicago and in Baltimore and in LA and in San Francisco. It's got to come to an end.
Oh, yeah. And the exodus. You notice the exodus in San Francisco now. People are evacuating. New York City. Chicago, which is my second city, because that's where I spent my first 5 years. It's where my father was from, South Side, 46 and Rockwell. And I have guardian angels there. And to look at Mayor, as I call her, lightweight, not ready for prime time. The gang problem is so overwhelming. It's like a scene. You probably remember, Andrew, The Warriors, the cult classic.
Well, I have an autographed DVD from the cast. One of my favorite movies of all time.
But remember the opening scene, Cyrus, the leading gang leader, has summoned all the gangs of New York City to a summit in the northernmost part of the Bronx. It's called Van Cortlandt Park. And as he's talking to the crowd of gangbangers, he's saying, we rule New York City. It's 400,000 of us. There's only 28,000 cops. He was right. He said, we can take over this city. And then he was shot. And then they chased the Warriors all through the subway systems of New York to Coney Island. But the reality was Cyrus was saying was true then in 1979. And unfortunately, it's repeating itself. And the only one who knows the transition, who lived through both eras, is yours truly, Curtis Sliwa. I stopped the gangs in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. And I know as mayor, I will have learned my lessons from Rudy Giuliani and my street smart expertise from the Guardian Angels, and I'll stop them in their tracks. In fact, there will be no situation as no bail. They'll be remanded to jail. We will impose bail because we will up the charges, and we'll make sure that citizens are safe and secure in the streets, the subways, the parks, the schools, and then New York City can be resurrected and become the great epicenter of cultural and entertainment and financial activity for the world again. But right now, we're on a respirator. Remember how Cuomo said, I need respirators. We don't have enough respirators for the financial life of New York City to keep us going.
Let me ask you this, and we could speak to this about any major city. You look at any major metropolitan city run by progressives, they send their own kids to private school and seek to end charters for other people. I think school choice is really that issue that conservatives and Republicans can introduce themselves with in some of these major cities where the school systems are falling apart. I mean, in the Bronx, in Harlem, in parts of Brooklyn. If you ask parents, do you want school choice? I cannot imagine, unless they're in the teachers union, parents saying no.
Well, Andrew, I have 3 sons in public school. As you mentioned, my oldest, Anthony, who's in high school at 17, Carter, who just had his bar mitzvah at 13, and his youngest brother, Hunter, who's in elementary school. So they're in high school, junior high school, and elementary school. They are introducing critical race theory into the curriculum of the public schools. An absolute disaster. I will stop that because the mayor, there's mayoral control of the Department of Education, which the acronym in New York City stands for dumbest organization ever. And they are really dumb there, a bloated bureaucracy. But they want to teach our kids to take a knee, to say that they are actually beneficiaries of white privilege, and they have to defer to children of color. Now, that's going to create tremendous chasms, tremendous tension in the classroom. And that's not going to be the case. And we are going to promote more charter schools. We're going to raise the caps. Look at all the children of color whose parents are waiting in a lottery system, sometimes having to wait years for their kid to go from a public school to a charter school. And I got to tell you, school choice. You want to send your kid to a public school or charter school, vocational schools, which are very important and never accentuated, or religious schools. I want to help you with a voucher, a tuition tax credit, especially the religious and parochial schools, because they were the only schools open during the pandemic. They were the only ones who had teachers come into the classroom with the children and give them the education they're entitled to. Not my sons. You know what they were doing at home on their computer? Half the time, as the teachers rotated in and on the screen, they were playing Fortnite. Roblox.
Yeah.
They weren't getting lessons. I would redshirt them all. I would leave back all the kids a year and give them an opportunity to get the education that we deprived them of.
You know, New York City and look, I understand that these major cities have, you know, issues that are different than the suburbs and more rural areas. But I really do believe, and I'm not saying this because I'm on BlazeTV and I'm on SiriusXM Patriot. I really believe conservative ideas can work in a major metropolitan city. I'm one of those people that believes if you keep the streets safe, if you give the parents choice in education, if you can manage the tax dollars properly so you're not wasting them and then having to raise taxes, I don't see why that's so crazy, right? If you manage the money that the people entrust you with better and you don't waste it, then you don't have to have confiscatory taxes. And when you've got a city like New York where the taxes are through the roof and the quality of living is not there, it's just an impossible situation for literally millions of people living in the 5 boroughs. I think these major cities need to try conservative leadership. All right, I got to wrap it up here. 30 seconds, Curtis. What do you want people to know?
Well, I'd like all of your listeners to help me in my mission because the Democrats, led by AOC, all-out crazy Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Democratic Socialists of America, the Justice Warriors, want to destroy capitalism in New York City, the epicenter of capitalism, of freedom. I want more free speech, not less free speech. I want more statues, not less statues. And I want an intellectually open-minded discussion about how to resolve our problems, not the stifling effect of AOC all-out crazy. To help my campaign, just go to CurtisSlewa4Mayor.com. That's CurtisSlewa4Mayor.com. If you can support me financially, help me fight off the horde of AOC all-out crazy sycophants, toadies, and lackeys who want to destroy the city that we love and which is the economic center of our country and the world.
All right, Curtis, thank you so much for joining us. We'll get you back soon.
Oh, thank you very much, Andrew.
All right, here we go. Time now for parting shots. And today's parting shot is at Congressman James Clyburn, who says no Democrat has ever been against voter ID.
I have never said that you should not have voter ID. When I got my voter registration card, I keep it in my wallet, and when I go to vote, I presented that every time. And I say to them, I am Jim Clyburn, this is my ID, and I want to vote. I've always had voter ID. And that's why the representative earlier told you, no Democrat has ever been against voter ID.
Okay. No Democrat or every Democrat? This is Parting Shots. It's a short ad-lib segment. I don't have the time right now to show you literally every clip of every single Democrat opposing voter ID laws. Texas Democrats literally got on a private jet to stop the vote on a voter ID law. Stacey Abrams made her entire political career out of stopping voter ID laws. Every single Democrat has come out against voter ID laws. Mr. Clyburn, it might be time to retire and sit on the beach with the grandkids because you are clearly out of touch. We're right. They're wrong. That's the end of the story. The arguments on this television program cannot be broken. Make sure you catch me on SiriusXM Patriot Channel 125, noon to 3 East, 9 to noon West. From Dallas, Texas, I'm Andrew Wilkow. Thank you for watching Blaze TV.